Welcome back to the African American Folklore series. In case this is your first time viewing, I'm Jonathan, a short story author, classical singer, and performer who was fascinated by folklore and the occult. This is part 2 of 1 in the African American Folklore series episode on finding Black fairies in the U.S. South. I had intention to upload this video weeks ago to cap off Black History Month, but life and school became very busy and I could find no time to finish the recording. But here we are, and welcome. In part 1, I discussed the lore, meanings, and etymology of fairies, and how they've shown up in Black American folklore. I also ended the video talking briefly about the little ones a-glowing, one of the folkloric terms for fairies as experienced by Black storytellers in the U.S. South. In part 2, we will dive ever more deeply into that mysterious fairy pool and find some answers to the questions that some have asked me. So, let's begin. So, the very first time that I remember encountering indigenous Black fairy stories as a child was in a copy of this book here, which is called Her Stories, African American Fairy Tales, Folk Tales, and True Tales by Virginia Hamilton. And I rediscovered this storybook years later now as an adult, and I had no idea that I had been reading into some very, how should I put it, very not hidden, but very not as easily findable parts of Black American folklore in the U.S. South. And I had been exposed to it at a very young age, and I had no idea that it was this great knowledge. I just thought it was, just another fairy story. But it's a part of our culture that's so hush hush. It's said to not even exist. And many of the people who knew about these particular beings are either they're elders in our community, or they've passed on. So it's really important that I do this work to kind of catalog and share and experience these parts of our folklore and our culture with all the people watching this channel. So I'm going to start off the rest of this video I'm going to go into the rest of this video reading from the folktale Mambet and the Little Ones a-Glowing, which is a fairy story that Virginia Hamilton found collected from storytellers themselves, and then adapted to fit her storybook. But it is an original Black folktale about fairies. And when I say indigenous Black fairy tale, I'm talking about indigenous in the terms that, not in the terms of it being Native American, but in the terms of it being something that grew out of Black American culture with not in terms of no influence from the continent, but it's something that grew organically out of the experience over here in the US. It is intrinsically American in every way, like jazz, for instance. And so this story and ones like it are definitely ones that I would include in that catalog of works. So anyway, I'm done rambling, and I'm going to go ahead and read to you all from Mambet and the Little Ones a-Glowing. So, as he says, story time. Mambet and the Little Ones a-Glowing. Mambet and her son Jody lived in a house at the edge of the fields where the woods began. The garden was shaded by a high old tree. Mambet often said the tree had taken a leap out of the woods right into her heart. Jody said Mambet loved the tree more than him. She laughed and teased back, "I love you both the same." Every full day clean, Mambet was there to see first light fall over the tree. On Friday, seated on her back porch, she waited for the day to gather in the leaves. Friday was the day when Mambet and all the other folks down on the lane kept out of the fields. Folks said Friday work was bad luck too. "Stay at home though, and something good may happen," Mambet told Jody. Every Friday, Jody would say, "I'm waiting for something good." Jody was a kindly young fellow for true. Just before dawn this Friday, Mom Bet sat, a cup of tea next to her on the top back step. Her garden of hollyhocks, zinnias, snapdragons, tomatoes, pole beans, and cabbages was in shadow. Then the gentlest foredawn came in, first in the corners, then shining on the flowers. Dawn light gleamed all over the tree, yet it was different somehow. It was twinkly, like starlight. Next, it was light bursting, like Mom Bet had never seen. It made her catch her breath and sit like a statue. The whole tree lit up like a Christmas tree. Streaking light breathed itself in with a gentle sigh. It poured from the top of the sky to stream down the tree trunk, spreading along every branch. Floating down with it came these perfect little ones. There were glowing little girl ones and little boy shapes, just the happiest little delicate ones. They rode light streams down and sprang on the blades of grass. They lounged on the zinnias. Two boy thems lifted dewdrops and tossed them to each other. All thems danced on the leaves. They fluttered and swayed, glowing like fireflies, not one of them taller than 2 inches. Little hers and hims tippy-toed on cobwebs, Mom Bet told Jody later. Tiny sister and brother ones made cobweb strings on the branches. Oh, what a show they gave! Ooh, can I see them little ones? I'll get up with you next Friday morning, Jody promised. And he did too. Next Friday came, and Mom Bet and Jody sat as still as stumps just for a day. The light gathered, streamed from the blue heaven, and one perfect, floating fairy her came down out of the tree on a light glow. She flitted before them long enough to smile at them, to swing on the cobwebs an instant. And as the sun rose, she tippy-toed up the tree from one leaf to the next, up into the heavenly light. She vanished as if she never was. Was she ever a good luck gift of Friday? Hushed, sitting close there, Mom Bet and Jody talked about it for a long time. That's all. So, I hope you all enjoyed this story. Um, it's very short, it's very brief, it gets right to the point. They're sitting there on a Friday in Mom Bet's house, and the fairies come down and do a light show. Nothing else really happens. Um, so if you were looking for something more specific, something more dramatic, if you were looking for troves and troves and troves of stories on the interactions of fairies and our people, it's going to be very, very hard to find. To the point where even Virginia Hamilton herself, she says in the book, she says, tales of fairies are few and mostly fragmentary in Black folklore. This tale by the author is based on sparse evidence. The African American spirit world is usually one to be feared, and it deals mainly with witches, devils, boohags, and ghosts. Friday is ominous in African American folklore. He who laughs on Friday will cry by Sunday, so the saying goes. Day clean in the story is a Gullah word meaning dawn or just before. The late part of the day is known as day lean. The sun is leaning towards the west. Um, so I also want to talk about Friday being ominous in African American folklore and its connection with fairies in particular. Um, Now, there are many in West Africa. There are many, particularly in Ghana. There are many names that children are given based on the day of the week in which they are born. These naming practices from the Akan and from the Ashanti also survived into Jamaica and the United States. And the names took on different forms as they went on, but the basic structure of it remained the same. So Friday being ominous in African American lore, I think it's a combination of things. Um, Again, I'll have to do some more research on this, but I think it might have a lot to do with elements of respect and holiness around the traditions of Good Friday, um, and it being, part of Holy Week, um, and also the one of the names for Friday is Afua, which is a name that is linked to fertility rites. And one thing I also know about a lot of fairy lore is that fairies are often associated with fertility, with changelings, with the giving and receiving of children. So I think there's a connection in there. I'm not quite sure. It's all very dubious right now, and like she said, based on sparse evidence. But yeah, I'm gonna have to do some more digging to find out if there's any connection between Friday being ominous in Black folklore with fairies and with uh, children being given names based on the days of the week. But I digress. Now, I don't expect that story to change anyone's life magically, but I want you to take away 4 things about it. 1. The little ones glowing never attacked Mombet or Jody. 2. The little ones glowing brought an experience of beauty. 3. Symbols of beauty in Black folklore often have nothing to do with outer physical beauty, but with spiritual truths that lie beneath the surface. 4. This is a Gullah story. Note the word Daylene/Daylene. This is a very important piece of information in understanding African American conceptions of the Fae. Now that I've given a recap, let's dig into the little ones glowing. There is more to them than meets the eye, and I am so excited to share my findings and folkloric theories with you all on where the little ones glowing may actually come from. So, the Wolof people of Senegal were one of many West African ethnic groups swept up in the horrors of the slave trade, and they brought their fairies with them. Many Wolof people wound up enslaved in the United States, and some elements of their language and various other West and Central African languages still survive in African American language dialects and folklore today. And I theorize that the little ones glowing come from the Yumboes of Wolof mythology. The Yumboes are also called the Baknarakna, or the Good People. In Gullah Geechee culture, a long-established community of African Americans who have retained the majority of uninterrupted African cultural influences, I suspect that there has to be a connection between the Yumboes and Gullah naming practices and the fairy spirits therein. This is what I mean. The Yumboes, according to Wolof tales, are said to be pearly white in color, with silver hair, and feast on huge tables under the moonlight, where they delight in foods such as fish, corn, yams, and pumpkins. Pearly white in color. If you remember anything about the story that I just read, the descriptions of the little ones glowing match up very eerily similar with that one. It says, dawn light gleamed all over the tree, yet it was different somehow. It was twinkly like starlight. Next, it was light bursting, like Mombet had never seen. It made her catch her breath and sit like a statue. The whole tree lit up like a Christmas tree. Streaking light breathed itself in with a gentle sigh. It poured from the top of the sky to stream down the tree trunk, spreading along every branch. Furthermore, in Africanisms in the Gullah dialect by Lorenzo Dow Turner, he identifies the Gullah personal name Yumbo as being from the Vai word Yumbo, meaning dainty, delicious food. But it is also nearly identical to the Wolof word Yomba, which means pumpkin. Pumpkin. Yomba. Dainty, delicious food. Yombo. The fairy's name, Yumboes. And the connections do not end there. The Yumboes are said to dwell on Gorée Island, off the coast of Senegal. What is Gorée Island? The location of the infamous Maison des Esclaves, or the House of Slaves, and the Door of No Return. This island and the infamous sorrowful door on its fortress is where multitudes of Africans were held captive from vast and diverse parts of the continent before being shipped off to the New World over a period. So, the connection in that story between agrarian black communities, sharecropper families, and the notion of helpful nature spirits that would bring an experience of beauty to a grueling day of work is what stands out to me the most. Fairies, for the black storyteller, are there, but they occupy a different spiritual housing than what we're used to in popular media. They are spirits that cannot be tied down by European notions of what is and is not a supernatural being of light, who may or may not have powers associated with fate, who may or may not be helpful, who may or may not be wise, who may or may not be a vicious child stealer. If anything, the Fae, in the Black Southern consciousness, seems to be more of a tutelary spirit which provides light and love to a suffering people. And of course, I know there's no way to currently prove this by academic means, but the purpose of this channel and the purpose of folklore isn't meant to be proven or distilled into quantifiable streams of knowledge. In other words, folklore is a living, cyclical thing that possesses its own rhythm, it has its own nature, and it adapts accordingly to the lived experiences of the people who tell these stories. Going off that though, the little ones are glowing being so prominent in the old tales of the Sea Islands off the coast of the southeastern United States, and their strong resemblance to the name Yumbo and the words Yombo and Yomba to the Yumboes of Senegal, have truly opened my eyes to the possibility that fairies, these nature spirits, may be much more connected to our liberation and cultural preservation than anyone could ever have imagined. The power these fairy creatures have in serving as a connecting point between the door of no return and chattel slavery in the diaspora has almost brought me to tears. If anything, fairies, in the Black Southern consciousness at least, are a reminder of the gentleness and the beauty and the light that resides within Black people. Once again, this has been another episode of the African American Folklore series. Thank you so much for listening and tuning in. And if you're new to this channel and you want to find out more, don't forget to subscribe, like, and leave a comment below. And always watch out